Everyone, to another episode of Re Behind the Scenes. Every Thursday, I host an episode of either Re Behind the Scenes or Transformation Time. My name is Diana Lizarazo, and today's guest speaker is Austin Yeh. On Re Behind the Scenes, our guest speakers are real estate investors looking to help you by sharing their experiences. So on Re Behind the Scenes, we'll be going through the property, what the strategy was. We'll be going through the numbers, and the most fun and biggest learning experience is the problems that were encountered, how they solved them, and if it were something new, then what they would do what they would do differently next time. So if you guys are ready, get your thumbs up, send some hearts for Austin, and I'll get him on. Let's cheer him on, and I'll just get him in here. There we go. Oh, there you go. A little bit of struggling, but I think we got it. Let me just confirm. Yeah. My dog decides that he wants to be here right now. Austin, did you get the message? Oh, you sent one. Okay, one sec. Go live. Okay.
Hello,
Okay.
hello. Hey, Diana.
How are you? Thanks for coming on.
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Good, good. So let's get started. Let's start with just telling the viewers a little bit about yourself. What's your strategy, or currently if it's changing? Because I mean, market changes also could be changing, whatever you'd like to share.
Absolutely. Yeah, so a little bit of background about myself. I started investing late 2018. So I closed on my first ever property on December 2018, and that was in Windsor. So about, what, 3 to 4 years ago now. I was working full time at RBC at the time. I wanted to build other passive income streams other than just relying on my full-time income, and eventually hit financial freedom, right? So I don't have to work that 9 to 5 rat race my entire life. That kind of got me into investing. I didn't have a whole ton of money saved up. So those who know my story know I only had about 40,000 saved up, which is a decent amount for sure coming out of university, but nothing that you could buy in Toronto. So I ended up actually investing long distance in Windsor, and that's where I started kind of growing my portfolio. And as you mentioned, over the past, I would say year, the dynamic in the real estate market has definitely been more challenging. When I was investing, like everything was basically a full BRRRR plus you get extra money out. Everyone was getting it. You didn't even have to do a single renovation. But now in the current market, I've definitely taken a lot of things for granted that were easier. So I have to be much more conservative when running my numbers. And as we get into a live deal today, I literally just got an appraisal back on a refinance. So we can get into all of the details on that, I guess, later on in this live. But the freshest deal that came to mind was the one I'm doing right now, and I'll be refining it.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear because those appraisals are changing. So that would be awesome to hear. So tell us, so what is the what project are you going to share with us today? What's the strategy? What did you do with it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So during the kind of turmoil in the market where things were dropping pretty significantly, I actually held off from buying. So let's say it was around March 2022 all the way until it was probably around September. I wasn't really buying anything because at that point the market was at a free fall. None of us really know what was going to happen, and prices were declining really rapidly. So I didn't want to jump in and catch a falling knife. Fortunately, prices actually started stabilizing a little bit more around the September period. And my strategy traditionally has always been the BRRRR, right? So I'm sure your listeners know: buy, renovate, rent, and refinance and repeat. Obviously, it's going to be much more difficult now, as you were mentioning earlier. Appraisals are a little bit of a nightmare, to say the least, at the moment. So I still am adamant in doing the BRRRR because a part of my growth has always been recycling money as quickly as possible. So what I did when I was looking at deals is that I try to look for deals that sat on the market on the MLS for a while, because usually there's not too much attention. People assume that something's wrong with the property, and it leaves good room for investors to negotiate. So there are a couple of deals that I had on the go. I actually purchased 4 deals. I sold one of them. And then one of them, as I mentioned, I just got refied, and the other one is going through refinance as well. We can touch on each one of them. But the entire premise of it was to find properties that were tenanted, see if I can negotiate vacancies before going firm on the property. And obviously in a hot market, you can never do that. You just have to assume the tenants, it is what it is. There's multiple offers. But when I'm the only person speaking with the seller's agent, they really don't have a choice but to work with me or to just let the property continue to sit on the market. So one deal that I purchased in Sudbury, for example, 3 units sitting on there for a very long time. I asked for feedback from the seller. They said because everything was under market rent, no one wanted to buy the property. I let them know that's kind of where my mindset's going as well, but is there any way to get vacancies? And she said, let me ask the seller. I spoke to the seller, and she says, yeah, I can get it fully vacant for you. No, I guess no one asked that question, and I don't
I
know
guess.
why
I
not.
don't know. I felt like that was a very normal question for us investors.
Yeah, yeah, but I guess when people went in the unit, I could tell why they might think vacancy isn't possible. So I spoke to another investor who actually walked in that exact same property. They said they didn't bother asking for it because they looked like 4 lifers. One of the tenants had so much garbage in the unit piled up like from the bottom to the top, and then the entire backyard was filled with like auto mechanic stuff, and it all belonged to that tenant. So I think people automatically assume it just wasn't going to be possible.
And
But
that's a great point right there. Sorry to
yeah,
interrupt you, but I think that's a great point that I want to reiterate is that we should never take assumptions and always ask questions because it's very true. Like we'll assume things and look at that. Like you were just like, well, let's just try, right? See what happens. So I just wanted to reiterate that because that's very important. I do notice like, yeah, in so many areas we'll make assumptions to things which can end up biting us in the ass, right? Or we just losing deals. So that's awesome
absolutely.
that you did that.
Yeah, and there's no downside to ask, right? Like it's not like I'm already firm on the property or anything. I'm literally just asking before drafting up a contract, right? That's again, like that's something that investors don't do very often. They don't like to pick up the phone, call, and ask questions and find out as much information as possible. But turned out that 2 of the 3 tenants actually, one of them was the son of the owner and the other one was a good friend, so it'd be easy to transition. And the last tenant was planning on moving out anyway, so it worked out. So got it vacant, got it below what the listing price was by $20,000 to $30,000. And also once we got an inspection clause in there and pointed at a ton of things in the inspection. They weren't willing to reduce price, but they were willing to fix all of these things because the seller was a handyman. So they fixed all of it subject to our approval, and we ended up closing that property with the majority of the big repairs being done, vacancy, and we renovated it, tenanted it. So we're just going through the appraisal process starting today. We'll see how that one goes. Another property, I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess I'll move on to another
But hold on,
property.
let's go with that one. I just wanted to finish. So that one is in the process of you're going to close it, you're saying,
Going
right? So you're
to
praising it to
refinance.
get funding? Pardon?
Yeah, so we purchased that and closed on it in December 2022.
And but the appraisal you were talking about before closing, you're talking about that appraisal, right?
That's for a different property, which I'm going to get into now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No,
The,
but you said just now that you got the appraisal, you were talking about it was like to be able to close on it. So that one you went with an A lender, B lender?
oh, yes, that one was with an A lender. Everything I'm doing is with joint venture partners. Because as you probably know, like the rates are so high that to qualify for like the service coverage ratio is fairly difficult on smaller multifamilies. Easier on the bigger multifamilies, but I'm finding a lot of the opportunities are with the smaller multifamily properties because a lot of them are mom and pop landlords that have owned the properties for a long time, haven't optimized it, and are not particularly very savvy investors, right? So there's that arbitrage of knowledge that you can take advantage of when you're negotiating. But that
And so for that one, did you like did the appraisal go as you expected it to go? Was it like did you like I'm not sure, were you trying to do 20%, 20, like what kind of down payment were you expecting and did you get it?
Yeah, so we purchased this at 310,000. It was listed at 340,000. The appraisal appraised exactly at what we purchased it on purchase. So we put 20% down, 80% leverage with RBC. And RBC allows for 3-month refinances, and we're going to get the reappraisal done within the next few weeks and see how it goes. But fortunately, and I wouldn't have expected this, like you can't really time these things, but as a lot of people probably know, the market has picked up the last 2 months. So I think that would be favorable for as an appraisal point of view. But keep in mind, like when I run these numbers, I'm running it based on depreciation, right? Like I have to assume that asset prices are may decline. I don't think it's prudent to assume that asset prices are going to increase, even
Mm-hmm.
though they kind of have in February. Oddly enough, I don't fully understand why, but it has. You can't underwrite for that. In a market like this, where there's still definitely a lot of uncertainty, you have to underwrite for a little bit of decreases, right? So I was prepared to leave money tied in the deal. Whereas before, maybe it wasn't something I'm as open to, but nowadays you need to put in the money knowing that absolute worst case, you're going to be tied in for your rental costs and down payment, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's like your worst case scenario. So I'm able to stomach the amount of money that I'm investing in these projects. But on my base case, I try to refi out at least 70% of the capital invested in. And again, it's just being conservative and creative in the deal making. When you can negotiate vacancies, you've immediately added a ton of value to a project.
100%. And then so for this project, once you closed on it, did you, because you did some, you had the previous owner do some renovations for you, like fix up some things
Yeah.
that were a problem with the inspections. Did you do any, or it was just now you were just looking for tenants?
Yeah, so when we by closing date, all we had to do was cosmetic. There were some cracks in the foundation, but not drastic. We got an inspector and a specialist to take a look at it. It was more so vertical, so we wanted it core filled for best practice. So there were things here and there that I wouldn't say that would have made us back out of the deal. We would have done the deal regardless, but it saved us $5,000 or $6,000 from doing those things. So when we got in there, literally our renovation for the 3 units were about 25K in total. It was just literally paint. The kitchen, we just painted the cabinets. It was like as lipstick as it could get
Yeah.
because the value add was literally getting the tenants out. That was the biggest value add in that situation.
That's amazing. That's great that you could do that. And I'll be definitely curious to hear how that, if you're able to do the within 3 months, if you are able to do it, because I'm hearing other, I don't know about that one, but other institutions they won't even do, because there were some that also did 6 months,
Yeah.
and they're not even doing that anymore. So I'll be curious to hear. Hopefully, we could get an update on that one to see like that how the appraisal went. Because I'm also hearing actually, even though it is a hot market right now, I am hearing that appraisals are still coming in
Mhm.
low. So it'd be great to hear because that also changes per city too, right? It's just like depends on where you are and stuff. So it'd be definitely great to hear the updates on that one.
Absolutely. And I can actually give you a real life example to address some of the concerns that you mentioned right now. And this is another deal actually. We purchased this triplex in Windsor on the closing date was November 30th. So the end of November, last day, 2022. Now fast forward, what is it? December, January, February. It's been like 3 months, 3.5 months, let's call it. So we closed on it in November 30th. One of the units were vacant when we purchased it. I was able to negotiate the other 2 units to take cash for keys and transition. So we're able to get all 3 units. That being said, let's put a pause on that for a second. When I was underwriting the deal, I only underwrote for that 1 unit being vacant. I couldn't assume that all of the tenants were going to vacate, right? I could try my best with cash for keys, but you can never always be like, this is for sure going to happen, right?
Mhm. And that's
Fortunate.
the best way to do it. You have to do it with, you can't make, again, assumptions, right? You can't be making assumptions because they can really like just create a lot of problems if you're just going to assume that you can't get it done.
Yeah, especially in Ontario, I'm sure like most of the listeners already know, the LTB is very much on side with the tenant, so they can go through a year without paying rent before getting an eviction notice. So you have to be very careful with these properties that you buy. And usually when I purchase these properties, I have an idea of tenant quality already, right? Like generally speaking, if someone's been there for 10, 15, 20 years, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get them out or cost them more money. If someone's been there less, maybe they're a little bit more flexible. Elderly people on a fixed income probably are not going to leave. People who are like 30 or 40 or yeah, 45, let's say, and they're working full time, easier for them to transition. Not ideal, but still possible, right? So important to understand the tenant quality when you get in these projects. So when I picked up this triplex for 510,000 in Windsor. It was in, I would say it's like a A minus A area, so one of the better locations in Windsor for sure. And that's what attracted me to the property. There's not many multis that come to it. There was one vacancy, and when the realtor put in market rent for that vacancy, they definitely lowballed it. So I don't know if the realtor was fully in touch with what was going on with rents at the time, but they posted an assumption on rent about 2 years back. So it'd probably be like 2020 rents that he put in there for the vacant unit. So I automatically knew I could get more than what he put there. So as a result, the price was actually really fair, surprisingly. So picked up that property immediately before there was any sort of competition. That's another strategy, right? Like some realtors, even if there's like a bidding date, it might be possible to put in a bully offer, right? Just depends on the situation. In that case, I was able to lock it up before any sort of competition. Now, fast forward, was able to negotiate cash for keys with the remaining two units, so completely vacant. That's where the biggest value add is, right? Now, we stepped in and did the cosmetic renovations for the most part. There are some renovations that we skipped out on or we cheaped out on, to be honest. In the previous market, I would never cheap out on these things, but in the current market, I am delaying as many renovations as I can. For example, with this house, the furnace is very old. It's functioning, but like it's probably not functioning to its fullest potential. I am going to replace it once it's fully out, or if the tenant actually has an issue with it, then I'll go ahead and switch it out, right? Another thing was with one of the units, they had a space heater as their main heating source, which you can't really do. I could have put HVAC. Could have put some ductless mini splits on there, but it was too expensive, and I just went with electric baseboard. I know people might give me crap for that, but at this point, I was just making these renovations as absolutely as lean as possible in the current market because I don't want to be overextended with my renovation costs. I'll deal with it
Yeah.
later when things pick up.
Exactly. That's a very great point because as you're basically alluding to, is like this probably won't even help very much the appraisals because in appraisals they're being super conservative, right? And
Mhm.
actually for people to some like something that people may not know is actually if you already have a furnace in the unit or in the house and you replace it, that actually adds no value to the appraisal anyways. But if you're adding like a non-existing and then you make a new, you put in new furnace, that will actually increase the value a lot. So even that is so like that even more of a reason to not get it done right now. Because I mean, at that time, in better times, obviously it helps with efficiency and everything. So there's a lot of other benefits to replacing it. But exactly what you're saying, I think is very true. It's very good right now to try to minimize and do what are the important things that need to get done or finding like you're saying like alternatives that will maybe aren't the full best solutions but good enough right now to get to what you need.
Exactly. I've been prioritizing a lot because I could go endless spending on renovations, but I know what my ARV's capped at what it is, right? Like it can't go much more beyond that. And my rent is capped at the end of the day. I just need to get what's enough now and I'll deal with the rest during better times, but I want to conserve liquidity. So with this project, we picked it up for 510,000. Cash for keys cost. One of the tenants was 5,500. The other tenant was also actually 5,500. Plus they got a couple of months free rent. So I don't know, let's call it 8K each one when we include the free rent that they got. So 16K in cash for keys in total. All three units are now vacant. Renovation costs, it was about 60 68 or 69,000, I believe. And then there's closing costs, land transfer tax, all of that, holding cost. All in terms of capital required, we're a little bit less than 200,000 after down payment, holding costs, property taxes, like everything in. And we paid for insurance up front as well, which I don't advise doing, but we ended up doing that as well. So that was our total cost.
And
Was
what was your reasoning, by the way? Curious to know your reasoning for why you didn't.
the insurance? Oh, it's not a very good. Like literally, I got an Amex card. I needed to hit the bonus points to get
Oh,
my Aeroplan points. I was like, all right, let's pay the
hey, that's a
insurance
good
up front.
reason. Gotta get those bonus
Yeah,
points, right?
yeah. So I was big on getting as many Aeroplan points. So I was just paying everyone, like every insurance is being paid up front. I wouldn't do it though in a normal circumstance. Definitely not. No. Um, but yeah, so where was I? So we ended up renovating the units and it only took about like a month and a half. That's a big part. Like I'm trying to be in and out of these projects as quickly as possible, minimizing renos, trying to minimize my cost and ensuring that, and it's tough for a lot of people to do this, but when I work with the contractor, I want to make sure that they're only doing one or two projects maximum, which is you got to find the right connections. Fortunately for me, this contractor was like crazy, worked on weekends, worked over the holidays, like did everything that they could to get it to the finish line. Also, they wanted to get paid out quicker, so I think that was also incentive for them. But we fully renovated the place, and the appraisal just came back today. I was like bugging my mortgage agent to get the appraisal number for this live in specific, but we picked it up at 510, all in, everything down payment and stuff. We put in about 200, a little less than 200,000. We got it reappraised at 870,000.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah,
That's
I was quite
amazing.
surprised. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't expect that at all. And just to make this clear, you guys, like when I was underwriting it, I was underwriting like maybe 720, 730,000. I was underwriting that $40,000 would be tied in the project. And that's something that people don't see. Everyone's like, oh, I got all my money out plus this. Yeah, but what did you expect was going to happen? I think that's even more important. And things could pan out better, yes, but things could also pan out worse at the same time, right?
I was gonna say it would also be good to get you to hear what happens with this one because like that it could be that like it prices well because I've also been hearing these kind of things happening where like you're refining with the same A lender.
Refinancing with the same A lender. So we bought it with RBC and we're refinancing with RBC in a 3-month
Because
period.
I've heard other people where if you stay with the same A lender, and I think even probably maybe switching different A lenders, maybe it's probably the same, but that they may not give you your full amount also just because they kind of like already have your business and like that things are getting so tight with the banks and the banks are super stressed with what, still the possibility, like you said, like things are still uncertain, right?
Hmm.
So I'd be definitely curious to hear how that goes because like that, like you're curious to see if they'll make some excuse to reduce it. Although even
Mhm.
if they reduce, like you said, like you'll probably still get a good amount of the money out, even if they do reduce it. So that's amazing to hear. So yeah, like you should definitely give an update on that because like that right now, it's all about knowing what banks are doing,
Mhm.
what the appraisals are doing, what decisions they're making.
Yeah, no, for sure. The bank actually already approved it. The bank is the one that called me and said, "Hey, it appraised at this. What are the next steps that you want to do?" So just to like, let me try to share my screen around, but I'll show you what I prepare whenever I go to an appraisal because I don't leave it at the appraiser's hand. I actually do pretty in-depth analysis. I'm gonna flip this around if you don't mind and let me know. If you can see, are you able to see this?
Yeah, the words, if you could go in closer if you want us to see the words or the
Yeah.
numbers.
So what I do is I put together a package, right? So I break it down by the income and comparable approach, and I give a property overview. I'm sure a lot of people already do this, but I go through the expenses and everything and cap rate analysis. I show them the value on different cap rates. I'm like, hey, I'm being conservative. I'm actually going to pull this number, like the highest of the cap rates. I've also, like, this is the big thing. I feel like the people who are having issues with the appraisals, maybe people who are doing conversions. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that kind of mostly what you're hearing? Is it the conversion people?
Yeah, or just, yeah, I would assume it is because they're doing renovations and refinance, so they must be conversions or just like renovations getting done on the property. Like it may already be a like a 2 or 3 unit property,
Hmm.
but and maybe they're just fixing it up. I'm not actually maybe well the ones I've heard actually now you say it, I think they were conversions, yeah.
I've heard that as well, actually, from some mortgage brokers and mortgage agents. It's tough to appraise conversions, right? Because there's really no data you're basing it off of. You're basing it off of precedents on other appraisers. But like conversions don't typically sell very often. You rarely ever see like a single family converted to a triplex sell. And so they're almost forced to comp it against purpose-built older triplexes, which hurt the appraisal value, I find. Kind of the argument
Hmm.
I make with the this is why I like these sort of properties so much is it's like quite cut and clear where right rental income prior to tenant turnaround was 22,500. Now it's 65,000. That's 190% lift in rental income in 3 months. So it's like it's harder for them to not see that I've added like nearly 200% in rental income, which is much more concrete in valuing a property than a conversion. Again, conversions like nothing to knock the strategy, but I definitely think there's for a lot more room for lower appraisals because there's again just not many comps to base it off of, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. So because yours is already existing, it like you're saying it's appraising better than if you're going from a single family to something else. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, because like I can literally point it out. Like what I've done is I show them my analysis when I purchased it, and this is the cap rate I arrived at. Using the same cap rate I purchased it with all my new numbers, this is what the value is now. So
Hmm.
it's like really from a numbers income point of view, but also I also definitely look at comparables as well, and this is where conversions may struggle. I think I'm not again not to knock the strategy. This is just my best guess,
Yeah.
but like I go
No, but
in
it's good
pretty
to know, right? To keep that in mind for people and just to, have that. It's always good to hear everyone's different opinions.
absolutely, absolutely, and to show you kind of how I go about it is I break it down, right? Like this is what the sold price is, this is how many units, price per unit, and then I make all of the adjustments necessary, like what's the condition, something like an appraiser would do. And then I see the new price per unit. I do that with multiple comps, right? And then I extrapolate it out after that into my property, and then I show before and afters. I give a list of renovations. Like I really try to minimize the appraiser from drifting too far from my thought process, and sometimes they may, regardless, right? But you want to like in this uncertain market, it's your job to do everything that you can to try to best
Mhm.
influence the appraisal. And kind of going back to the conversion, where I think it may struggle is that I mean, you look at cost per unit, right? And like for example, when you look at existing property, let's say a triplex sells and the triplex is like under market rent. So the cost per unit's 150K. Like I don't think an appraiser will actually go in, look if that triplex was tenanted, what the rents are, run the numbers and the cap rates and stuff. They'll almost just look at price per unit and then look at your new conversion price per unit and just like extrapolate based off of that instead of actually like going down and crunching all of the numbers and spending a lot of time doing that, right? That's where I see
Mhm.
that there may be a little bit more room for error there.
Mhm. Yeah,
But
those are very great points and good to take into consideration when getting your own properties because yeah, definitely and that's why, right, there's just so many different types of properties, cities, like there's so many things that everything can change. Like the type of lender can make a difference, the city can make a difference, like you said, the type of property can make a difference. And and another thing that you're alluding to, which I think is also important, is like we got so used to the last 2, 3 years being so easy to get money from people, so easy to get deals done and winning very easily that it wasn't really a testament to how good you are
yeah,
as an investor. But now is the time, like you have to put in that effort, right? Even like that raising capital, like you have to know what you're selling, right? You have to, like you said, like put in more effort to the appraisers, to every part that you're involved in. There's a lot more effort involved to just make sure that things will run as smoothly as possible in this kind of environment.
Yeah, for sure. I absolutely agree with you. And I will say, so like to show this deal as an example, it worked out very well. But as I was going through the deal, I always felt uncertain. What if the market
Mhm.
dips? What if this? What if that? What if things don't go well? What if the appraiser doesn't agree with me? Right? Like it's easy to show these wins right now,
Yeah.
but I participated in a market that was just like running upwards. So I was confident at that time, but purchasing properties now, I use a lot more caution. And even when I go in these deals, like you saw, like this was like a full BRRRR plus more money out, I felt uneasy the entire process. Like shit, like I don't know, maybe money can be tied in. And you need to have that voice in the back of your head. I think that voice is actually good to help you rationalize your decisions, where it's like, okay, what if money is tied in? Like, are you okay with that or not, right?
Yeah,
Um,
great point. And it is true. I feel like this, I think this happens for everyone. Same thing. Last year I was doing a flip and it was right in like that. We're putting it on the market in September. And I think the last 3 months, every month, I'm like, what's going on? It was specifically in Hamilton. So I'd look like, what do the numbers look like now? And then next month, what do the numbers look like right now? Because I'm saying like, I'm like that thinking like, do we need to sell sooner or we're okay for September? And like deciding, like you're saying, right? It's like, where are all the decisions happening? Like, do we got to go
yeah,
quicker? Are we okay? Spending more money? Do we need to pull back on the money? Like, and this is what it's going to be, I think, for this year and probably the next year too, is just like very cautious thinking. And like you said, it's good to have that. Like, don't let it stop you, is basically what you're
yeah,
saying,
yeah,
right? But definitely listen to it as kind of like, hey, just watch out for this. Like, think
mm,
of it in that way, right? And then you'd be like, okay, let me just double check my numbers, or let me just check how the market is doing. Am I still on track? Do we
yeah.
need to pivot a bit? Do I need to just be like, you know what, we may be a little losing, or not having like all the money pulled out, like you said. It's like just accepting that coming in
Yeah,
for sure.
you can't let that stop you, because that voice is always going to be in the back of your head no matter what,
Mhm.
right? And if it's not at the back of your head, then I don't know, like that. I think that's what gotten people into tough situations before. They didn't have that voice and they scaled way too quick, and what
Yeah.
transpired ended up happening, unfortunately.
That's a good point. Actually, curious for you. Um, when the market was
Yeah,
good, did you still stress a little
I did.
about like the projects you were
I
doing?
definitely did, because it's when the market was good, I think even if you were getting below market value, it's always still may feel like you're overpaying a bit, because it was hard to justify that, right? Like if property prices went up 10%, or not 10%, if it went up 5% in 1 month, I would still be stuck on the previous month before the 5% run up, right? And it's like always, it's definitely it's always been a challenge, right? I just felt like before it was easier to pull the trigger, I guess, but now it's more of the reality of what's going on. And I like the point that you bring up, where even when we go into these deals, obviously we feel confident in them, but as you go through it, you never feel comfortable. There's always like a bit of uneasiness. There's always reevaluating in decision making. And I think that's things that investors don't see. They want the perfect deal. No investor that is successful is going after every deal that they think is going to be absolutely perfect, right? There's always a little bit of uncertainty in your head, but
Hmm.
you do the best that you can with these deals. If you're sitting around waiting till you feel 100% confident in any one deal, I would say that you might not ever buy anything. I've never felt 100% no stress, full confidence going in a deal. There's always been a little uncertainty.
Yeah, 100%. That's very true. And that's why I asked you the question because, and like you were saying, with people that have put themselves in bad situations, either they don't have that voice in their head telling them, or maybe they're ignoring it too much. Because I think it's the same thing. I feel like it didn't matter if I was in the good market or in the bad market. It was still like I was still stressing and paying attention to the market, and same thing what you're saying, right? Like I feel like that's normal. Like as soon as you close on the property, I feel like that's just a normal thing to be
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I overpaid, like I don't, your mind just for some reason always goes to that, right? Same thing, like you start doing the renovations, you're getting close to the end, maybe there's some delays or some problems, and then you're thinking, oh my God, I'm overpaying, or sorry, like yeah, overpaying the renos, or we're getting delayed, and And it's just I think like that it will always happen. Probably just now it's probably a lot more because things are
Hmm.
so certain that I feel like you'll have the stresses back then. They're stresses, but I think now we probably feel them a lot bigger just because it is a lot more uncertain.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One thing I did want to chat about is I know that you always like to get into kind of learning lessons and losses with the projects.
Mhm.
Now more than ever, one of the biggest challenges is that when I do cash for keys and I buy these properties, I know that even if a tenant signs on for 3 months or 4 months, they could ride it out for a year before they end up getting evicted, right? It could be non-payment of rent or anything like that. And I definitely went through a situation. So a 5 unit we closed on, and I believe it was mid-November 2022, negotiated cash for keys with all the tenants. One of them, it was just such a challenge. They didn't move out on the day that they were supposed to move out. And it was like, okay, like, what do I do now? Am I going to have to wait 8 months before they get evicted? Like, that's probably not going to be the greatest solution. Because as I'm renting the other units, they're not going to be a happy tenant. They might go in, try to break in, steal. They might do some stuff that is going to challenge the renovations for sure. So I was like, I need to figure out a way to kind of like work out a solution with this tenant. And a learning lesson from that is that I just needed to be more proactive in ensuring that they transition, helping them get connected with property managers, literally going out and helping them find units as well, right? And that's what I've been doing more so now is I've been following up with them every week or 2 weeks. Hey, how's the search going? Is there anything you need me to do? Do you need a letter recommendation? Hey, I saw a couple of these units on Facebook Marketplace that just came out. Why don't you try to give them a shot? And being definitely more proactive in that sense, right? Like that's the last thing you want when you want to buy like tenanted properties. You want to just make sure that you're cooperating with them and helping them make that transition as easy as possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's great. And actually, just to confirm it, if I have fully understood, that person that was delayed, they accepted the cash for keys,
So
but
they
they
did
didn't move
accept the cash for
back?
keys. They never moved out. It didn't even look like they started to move out. And I regretted not following my gut and following up with them more. So we worked out a solution. So what I ended up doing is we ended up helping them find a place, but we wanted to get reno started immediately. So we put them up in a motel. So it costs an extra 2.5K because we booked the motel out for a month. And during that month, we were constantly going and trying to help them find another place. Otherwise, I knew they would just shoot back into their place anyways, right? So it gave me incentive. I have 30 days. I got to help them find another place. And it ended up working out. But I should have just been on them during those 3 months, right, that I had
But so when
prior.
you give, when you give them, do you give them the cash before they, sorry, my dog, before they leave?
I give them a
Or
deposit. I give them like, let's say if I'm gonna give them 5 grand, I'll give them 1 grand when they sign via e-transfer check, something traceable, not cash, and then I give them
Mhm,
the rest when they leave. But
mhm.
sometimes they will have a challenge making first and last month, and I will let them know if you have a signed lease and you let me call your landlord, I'll make the first and last month for you, and we'll net it out against like whenever the back end when you leave. So for this tenant, yeah, they didn't leave. Obviously, they didn't get that cash there, but I was gonna keep that amount to give to them anyways because I needed to really incentivize them to leave. Plus, I had to pay for their motel, so another $2,500 on top of that, right? But when you're
Mhm.
dealing with these properties, time is of the essence. So two
Yeah,
thousand
100%.
dollars, yeah, 2 grand might sound like a lot. It's actually not a lot, but it may sound like a lot. But in the long run, you get the project done quicker and less headaches.
100%. And something that I also want to reiterate that you're doing is that you're very proactive in the problem solving,
Yeah.
which I think is very important. It doesn't matter the market, to be honest, but problem solving and communication skills. I just want to say that because I can tell that the way you're talking about it, that you have good communication skills, like you're able to, listen to them and help them, right? To be able to help them move forward, right? Because sometimes it is like if you come off like aggressive or something, the wall will go up and nothing will happen, right?
Yeah.
And I
Speak to
think
my
that's a
lawyer.
very, very, yeah, and that's a very, very important thing. And I can see that you have that because the fact that in the properties you've been able to get the tenants out just shows how good you are at communicating and helping them find solutions, because I mean they're moving out for a reason, right? Like that, if you come in aggressive or in a different way, they'll probably completely shut down.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so for one of the tenants, for example, they wanted 5 months to move out. Some landlords would be like, no, like 3 months. Like it's not your choice as a landlord. You got to work on their terms as well. They have more, like a lot of the time, they have more rights than you on staying in the place. And so landlords like to feel like they have the control and call the shots, but you really don't, right? Like you got to work around their needs. And when you're too selfish in your own thoughts, like $5,000 is my limit, 3 months is my limit, you're going into negotiation the wrong way. You have to find out what works for them. That tenant that needed 5 months is because they wanted the child to finish their semester in school. They didn't want to move mid-semester. Totally fair point. I can't push them to take 3 months or 4 months. If I do that, it'll come out as insensitive, right? But some landlords may try to still push for it to get the work done sooner, but it's a losing battle. A parent is always going to put their kids' values and beliefs and what's best for them above $2,000-3,000. They're always going to put their child above that, and that's what a good parents would do, right? So I didn't challenge that. I was like, okay, 5 months, and let's talk about the money now, because you know the timeline that works for you.
Yeah, and like that's what, again, good communication is, right? Understanding what their needs are and understanding what are the issues that they have that are stopping them from, let's say, moving out or doing certain things. So again, like, yeah, I feel like I just want to reiterate this so much, because this even happens with when you find bad tenants and then, let's say, having to go through an eviction process. Like, there aren't many times where you can actually prevent going all the way to like
Yeah.
getting to an eviction. And usually that's like that, the communication, the understanding, like what are the problems, like how can we help, how can we figure this out, like make it a win-win for both of us, right? So I just, yeah, it's really great that you're doing all that, because it's just a testament to how great you're doing right now, right?
And to circle back around on a point you made in the beginning, that's really important. Don't make assumptions. And that's the same thing when you approach tenants. If a tenant stops paying rent, immediately, like back when I got started, I was immediately like, fuck, why isn't rent being paid? I'm going to go in guns blazing. No, don't make assumptions. Like, what if they lost their job? What if an emergency seriously happened and they depleted their funds?
Mm-hmm.
Don't make any assumptions. Go in with a level-headed conversation. Even if they are going in and let's say like they're causing a ruckus in the property, don't make any assumptions. Go in clear-headed, and I know it's hard to do, but have that respectful conversation with them. And even if you disagree with them, figure out what's going on in their head. It's not a matter of you convincing them that you're right. It's a matter of understanding their thought process and
Yeah,
exactly what you're saying. Then figure out what we could do if you think like that. Like, how can we solve it, right? You're not going to change someone's thought
100%.
process. Yeah.
100%. And I think that that's usually is the problem, right? If we're thinking on I all the time, it's not going to help you, because they don't care, no offense, about you, you know?
Yeah.
They care
Hmm.
about them. And so you have to figure out how you can help them get their issues out of the way so they can do what they need to have to do, which once they get what they want to get done, then it kind of also indirectly helps you, because then they will leave because their issues have been removed, and now they're able to, let's say, get out of the unit. So yeah, like,
Hmm.
it's great that you're doing what you're doing. It's so important to do that, and it just helps prevent lots of issues, to be honest.
100%. Yeah. If you're investing in Ontario, you definitely need that skill set, I would say.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, if you're in Ontario, I feel like it's an amazing way to hone those skills for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
We did have a question. I'll ask you now. Um, it says, Austin, if you have the same 40K to start right now, what would you do that you didn't before? From where would you start?
If I had $40,000 today, I think my thought process when I had my first 40,000 getting started would be similar as today, which means that find a market that I can afford, right? My thought process was invest in the GTA. I didn't know anything else, but I couldn't afford it, so I started looking at neighboring cities on what was the most affordable. Windsor happened to fall into my budget. It is I would say the city obviously does matter, the fundamentals of the city, yes, but I also think that putting that money into real estate, cash flowing real estate, and then getting in the market, understanding the fundamentals of investing, which you learn the most by doing. Yeah, you could take that 40,000 and spend 20,000 in coaching, but then you won't end up buying a property. Like you don't have enough money to buy a property, right? Like the best
Mhm.
school is by actually taking action. So 40,000 today, where could you buy in? Maybe not, possibly Sudbury, a single family house. That could be something to get started. Maybe you have a friend that also has 40,000, pull your resources. Now you have 80,000, and that opens some more market opportunity. But I would it's like driving till you qualify, driving until you can afford something, and then being an expert in that market. Knowing the ins and outs, seeing if the fundamentals make sense, and like jumping in head first, right? But obviously you want to
Mhm.
build a connection and the network with people. But yeah, I would do like you're not going to be able to buy Windsor on 40,000 anymore. But there is a market
Mhm.
out there that you could probably buy. Maybe Cornwall. Cornwall, maybe you could do it, right? But same thought
Mhm.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, great points. And like that, either finding where you can invest, but still do the research, guys. I feel like I need to tell people all the time, right? It's like do the research, make sure you know what you're getting yourself
Yeah.
into.
Hmm.
And like that, another great point, which I think is going to be happening or is happening a lot right now, is exactly what you said, partnering up, right? Finding people you trust and pooling the money together because it's just like something that we have to do, especially if you're only looking, let's say if you only want to invest in a certain area and maybe you don't have enough money, then that's also another approach to take is
Hmm.
just like, okay, fine, I may not be able to afford it on my own, but what is the expression they say? I'd rather have a small piece of a watermelon than a whole grape.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So, any other problems that you encountered that you would like to discuss
Yeah,
with us?
mo most of it has definitely been on the tenant side. A lot of the conversations have been so like non-payment of rent. I had three non-payments of rent with new tenants that my property manager placed, and it's so irritating. But again, it's kind of what we chatted about before, having that same skill set. So I before used to let my property manager deal with those sort of calls, but there's usually not a sense of urgency there. And usually it's very transactional conversation. So I've taken that into my own hands as well. But I've been noticing, like in some of the markets I invest in, and that's what you're saying, understand what you're getting yourself into. Windsor's primarily a blue collar city. One of the people that stopped paying rent was like a handyman or contractor. There just wasn't much business then. A lot those guys are not on salary a lot of the time, right? And so they didn't have business, so they couldn't afford to pay the rent. So under like that has been more in the back of my head now. Really, really vetting the tenant quality, and I'm okay letting a unit sit vacant for like 3 months to find the right tenant. I'm okay taking below market rent to get the right tenant because I'll tell you that one tenant who stopped paying rent, like it would have been better I just accepted someone at $100 cheaper. It would have cost me less money, right? But I'm picking
Yeah.
up the phone and I'm calling these tenants like what as we discussed about before and asking them what's up, what's going on, do we need to be on a payment plan? Is there anything I can do to help? Do you need to find like are you going to be able to afford this place over the long term? If not, what can we do to get you in a better place, right? Having those
Mhm.
conversations proactively right away. But I think that is the most struggle for a lot of landlords because the renovation stuff you can always get over it. Like what happens, you end up spending more money, it ends up taking more time. Normal. Every single one of my projects, for the most part, has taken longer or cost more money. It's not really a unique problem, but I would say the tenant situation could be devastating, costly, and scary.
100%. Yeah, because it's not just them not paying. They could like mess up your property. And if you already did the renovations, not a good situation to be in.
My corgi's gonna say hello.
Um, so Kimon's laying right underneath me today.
Sorry, what
Although
was
mine's
that?
big, so I can't
Oh,
lift mine up.
yeah, he hates being lifted. I'll put him back down. Oh, there you go, buddy. There you go, bud.
But another great point that you were talking about is right now is the time to be very picky with the jobs that your tenants have. If you're in the process of finding tenants, it's very important right now to be very picky with them. And to be
Hmm.
honest, I think right now, like I feel like my number one favorite is government jobs because they're bulking up on governments. I mean, we saw
Yeah.
this during COVID, right? When we go into when the country or states, I don't know why I'm saying states, provinces go into like a chaos mode, what do? Governments have to bulk up to manage all of that. So I
Yeah.
feel like that's like my number one finding, but definitely like the other way around, right? Like not going for people that get cash jobs, not going, I mean, I don't ever go for those anyways, but but
Hmm.
like retail jobs or very seasonal type jobs is
Yeah.
something that same thing. It's just like right now is not the time because of the flux we're in. It's just it is like just a scary time that the certainty of jobs. And to be honest, I mean, what does the government want right now? They need more unemployment,
Yeah.
right? They're not happy. Like right now, unemployment is still quite low. And I believe they didn't increase the interest rates, right? I didn't
They did
actually
not.
look. I didn't get a
No.
chance. Yeah, and I expected it because they said they wouldn't. But they're going to wait it out. Like everything's delayed when it
Yeah.
comes to the retail side, but it's
People are
going to go
celebrating way too
down.
early. Yeah, people
Yeah.
are celebrating early, in my opinion. I didn't expect
Oh,
for them to
100%.
increase it as well, but I think there is like still opportunity to increase it later in the year because the U.S. government has increased their target, and we just can't fall behind too aggressively.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to be forward looking in real estate for sure, especially in this market.
100%. Yeah. And like that, I'm with you. I feel like actually as we speak, I feel like we have a lot in common because we're both like very conservative with our numbers and like I'm the same with you. I also always look at all the tenants that are coming in and I vet them myself because exactly you said like no one like the owner will vet it as like the best that they can.
Hmm.
So I agree with you completely because I mean property manager, I mean, they're just getting paid. They don't really care. And like that, their mentality may be different. Like exactly you're saying, they're like, oh, I look good if I get a tenant in quickly. So they may
Yeah,
sacrifice on things where we'll be like, no, 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 I'd rather wait like
yeah.
a couple months and get that great tenant in there because because of the problems that happen in Ontario.
Exactly. And you need to be if you guys are using property managers, which I am, you do need to be proactive. There's a lot of time. I take a lot of things into my own hands. For example, oops, sorry, one second. Yeah, for example, I will go out and look for the listing that they posted. If I don't like the photos, I will tell them to retake it, right? They're not going to tell me no. And if they tell me no, I was like, okay, then I'll just lease with someone else, right? Like I'm making sure that the marketing is as good as possible to attract people to want to walk through the units, right? It's almost like listing on the MLS. You want to make things look nice and attract the highest quality buyers, in this case, tenants, to go through.
100%, completely agree. And like that, like you can have a property manager, but you just tell them, I'll give the final say, send me all the
Exactly.
details, and I'll just give the final yay or nay on the situation.
Yeah, those are tough learning lessons. I didn't do that before, and those are the people who are not paying rent. And so I am doing that now, and I've made that very clear. Every single tenant that is going to be leased now has to go through me for it's like, it's a little bit of laziness. At the end of the day, these mistakes, I can point at my property manager, sure, but I have to take accountability at the end of the day. It was my laziness for not vetting it.
100%. And I think that's another great point that you're bringing up because I know back, especially like when things were good, there was this like movement going on about like sitting on the beach, doing nothing, and then like letting everyone work. And that's like not the reality of things. That's not how things work. Sorry to
Yeah.
say, it's like it takes time to build those teams, especially if you're going to build someone that you can actually fully leave them to alone. Like there's only a certain type of people that can do that. Like a lot of them need direction and need to have you being on them or telling them things, like some like if they're so good at doing their own job without like any direction, most likely they're starting their own businesses or doing
Yeah.
their own things because that's what we are, right? We're very autonomous people. We're like, let's get things done. Let's take action. And so I feel like I just wanted to say that
For
because a
sure.
lot of people think it's super easy. And I've seen other people like that also crash and burn because
they leave the teams and they're like, oh, I hired these people and they'll do their jobs, and then it doesn't because they weren't monitoring, for example, the
Hmm.
renovation from afar. Like that property man, same thing with property man. Maybe we're not monitoring it, not giving enough direction. Like so many things can go wrong, and that's really something that it takes years. Like it's not months. It's like years to build that confidence and find those right people that you can leave them maybe a little longer than the normal, but there is always those follow-ups that you have to
For
do.
sure. Yeah, yeah. I think when you're growing in real estate, it is best practice to monitor your portfolio. And speaking of mistakes, that's another mistake. Sometimes I just see the rent hit and I'm like, okay, cool. And then I go and start looking at the invoices. I'm like, holy shit, how many things were wrong with this property that needed maintenance issues? Did this really need to be done? Did you push back on the tenant and say this was their fault, so why am I paying for it? They need to repair it. And I paid for so many things that from tenant's neglect. Maybe there's a hole in the drywall. That wasn't there before. I'm not going to go pay and fix that. The tenant has to go pay and fix that. But I've let a lot of that slide until I've taken a lot more control and started auditing these things, right? And then training my property manager to push back on the tenant before I have to pay out of pocket for it. So a lot of good points you brought up there. It's not a passive business. If you treat it as a passive business, then a lot of money is going to be flowing out of your account that you're unaware of, and you can optimize your business much more, but it's all due to laziness at the end of the day, right?
It is. It is. Sadly, it is. But at the same time, it's like, do you really want to be sitting doing nothing on the beach? Most likely not. Like, it's nice for like a week, maybe even two. And then you do want to do something like, it's nice to be active doing things. And it's like, why not make a small percentage of that your real estate if you're that well off that you don't need to be so active anymore,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Totally on board. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing your stories. It was so informative. I'm excited to hear how like the appraisals will go. So it looks like the second one though, so it's all approved. You're just gonna wait
Yeah.
for the funding to come in. That's so
Hmm.
exciting. That's amazing to hear actually a success story happening in this time because it is rare to see them and it can be done. It's just you gotta really know your numbers. You gotta really understand. And I mean, we're always gonna be stressing. Can't get
Yeah,
out of it.
exactly.
So might as well just make
Exactly.
sure you're minimizing the amount of
I
stress.
have three more appraisals coming up, so I'll definitely give an update and see how it all goes.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. I know everyone loved what you hear. If you guys love what you hear, Austin will be tagged on this. So if you guys want to give him a follow, definitely he'll be tagged in this video. And if you guys love watching my shows, definitely same thing, follow me. Thank you, Austin.
Thank you, Diana. This was fun. Chat
Thank
soon.
you.
Bye bye.
Yeah, for sure. Bye.